The first thing, the playoffs have been boring. And yes, even when there's good hockey, I think that the NHL has legitimate issues. Some of them their own fault, some of them outside of their own hands. TV ratings in the U.S. are down 28% right now. Yeah. When you're a league like the NHL that already has low TV ratings, going down almost 30% is a bad sign. They were surging in Canada. Yeah, a lot of Canadian teams up there. That doesn't secure you ESPN or TNT money going into your next contract. So I think the NHL should be concerned about that. Number two, it does not benefit them that they continue having Southern teams dominate this sport. Yes, I know why they wanted Southern markets to be successful. They were trying to expand their reach. They've had some success in that. But having Southern teams dominate this league is part of the reason why the ratings are down. And it's going to cost them millions of dollars in TV contracts in the future if we continue having low-rated Stanley Cup finals with teams like the Florida Panthers and Tampa Bay Lightning in them every single year. People say they want to talk about stars. The problem about the NHL is that the general sports fan in the United States isn't tuning in to watch hockey games because of stars. If you're a football fan, if you're a basketball fan, if you're a baseball fan, and you don't live in a hockey town, you're not watching the Stanley Cup Finals regardless of who's in it. It could be Sidney Crosby versus McDavid. You're not watching it. Why? Yeah. Because outside of hockey markets in the U.S., people don't care about hockey. It sucks, but it is what it is. So when you have teams in these hockey markets in the South that have limited fan bases to begin with, it's just not bringing people in. And then the second thing that is a pain as a result of it is the NHL playoff format is a complete joke. Ever since the focus on divisional matchups, you know what happens? We get great first round and great second round matchups because it's divisional contests that are tight. And then we get conference finals that stink. Carolina versus Florida, 4-1. Dallas, Edmonton, what was that? 4-1. Yep. Like neither of those were even exciting. And you know what the funny thing is? Somebody gave me a mock. If we went to the 1-8 system that we had in the past that preceded this, those both would have been first-round matchups. So, what are we doing here? The problem with the NHL playoff format is conceivably the second-best team in the entire NHL could play the third-best team in the NHL in the first round, while the 11th-rated team could play the 12th-rated team. And this is actually not even good for the best teams in hockey because then you have one of the top three teams eliminated in the first round in that scenario. And then you have a team that's 11th or 12th advance. It's a messed up system. And then it also limits possible matchups. If you're going through division matchups the first two rounds, that means you don't normally see a team like, New Jersey play a team like Boston in the first or second round because one of them would have to be a wild card versus another team that wins the division. It limits possible matchups. So the whole format is mathematically flawed. It's metrically a mess. It's a joke of a format. It's a minor league format. The league doesn't care because they say it's bringing rivalries, but these teams only play 3 times in the regular season anyway. So how are you actually improving rivalries? And it's the reason why teams like Toronto get eliminated in the first and second round every year because no matter how good Toronto is, they have to get past the Florida Panthers, who are a horrible matchup for them. So Toronto could get 130 points, and guess what? They're going to lose in the second round still because they got to get past Florida, while somebody in the other division doesn't have to play Florida, like Carolina, and they get all the way to the conference finals. What type of league has it to where better teams get penalized for being in the divisions that they're in? It's a joke. It's stupid. It defies logic. So that's my first thought on the NHL playoffs. I try to have a tweet about it, but you can't talk common sense on X, because you only have 280 characters, and anybody that disagrees with you just calls you an idiot. The second thing that needs to be talked about is this tax situation with Florida and some of these southern markets needs to be addressed. And I'm tired of people saying, well, why don't you just learn how to beat them? Here's the thing about sports. You can have an advantage and still be incredibly well run. Tampa Bay and Florida, 2 great run organizations with a lot of great players. They would be successful no matter if they were in Tampa, South Beach, Buffalo, Toronto, Vancouver, anywhere in the country. No matter where they are, they would be successful. But would they have been as successful as they've been? Probably not. And people are going to say, well, 15 years ago, they were stinking. Nobody said anything back then. 15 years ago, we didn't have the analytics and metrics we have now. What analytics and metrics have done is they have exposed any weaknesses in thought and strategy. So now every teeny advantage gets magnified and gets it's so much bigger now because the margins are so thin in sports like hockey. This tax stuff is a problem. If somebody is deciding to stay in Florida for $8 million versus going to Toronto for $11 million, that's a $3 million gap. And even if you said, well, Toronto could have paid the 11. Well, that's $3 million less Toronto has for a depth player that might be important for what they need. And you have all of these cities with different tax codes. How are we in professional sports where any team has an advantage over another due to tax code? People then say, well, what about the other leagues? Well, in the NFL, if you play for the Miami Dolphins, you're taxed when you play your game check in Buffalo. So half of their games, they're getting taxed based on where their opponent is playing. So they're not just getting Florida taxes. They're getting taxes in other locations. The hard cap is a joke. MLB doesn't have a salary cap. So MLB doesn't have these issues because it's whoever wants to spend the most. And then in the NBA is such a different league than the NHL from every facet. It's not about bottom line. They're all getting max contracts of $50, $60 million anyway. What is $1 to $2 million to them? Not much. And then on top of it, in the NBA, they're wanting to play in big markets where they can get all the publicity, get the super teams. In the NHL, how are teams supposed to compete with what Florida and Tampa and Dallas and them all have going on? You look at this is another example of it. The last 6 teams to represent the Eastern Conference in the Stanley Cup Finals are all in Florida. 3 in Tampa, 3 in Florida. The Dallas Stars have gone to 3 straight Western Conference Finals. They have a beneficial tax system. The Vegas Golden Knights, they have beneficial things in place in Vegas. The teams that are dominating the sport right now are the teams in the places that have the benefits. Those are the teams that are making the runs. It's so obvious it's making an impact. Now, I get it. People want to say, you got to beat them. You got to do some stuff. Kevin Adams got killed for bringing up the palm trees and everything. And yeah, we laughed about it. It's funny. He's not supposed to say it as a GM. A GM is not supposed to be making excuses for the lack of performance. But there's some truth in what Kevin Adams is saying. How is he supposed to recruit people to Buffalo when they're paying higher taxes? It's a losing culture. And you're talking about cold weather, small market versus, and then toxic fan base on top of it versus Florida, Vegas, Dallas, Tampa, where you know what happens if you're going to the Florida Panthers? Sam Reinhart could score 20 goals in a season and have 35 points and be a minus 30. You know how many people in Florida are going to care? No one. No pressure. Zero pressure. He's getting the money. He's not getting taxed on the money, yet he's in a winning culture. Sam Reinhart could break Wayne Gretzky's single season goal record and score 100 goals in a season. Do you know how many people are going to notice him on a beach after winning his 5th straight Stanley Cup? 3 or 4 people. They live, they're basically hockey players down there without any of the bad things that go along with being a professional hockey player. These tax issues need to be addressed. The NHL is minor league, and they don't think that this is an issue. And both of these are problems that any other league would address if they were run by professionals.
So I guess I'm wondering. Hey, I don't know what the solution would inherently be. I assume that it's the thing about if there is still an advantage in like the NFL, for example, when you play at home, you play 8 home games, right? Or 9 home games every other year. So you do have that advantage. But it's also the roster is significantly bigger. So you have more play with whatever the contracts have more. Oh my gosh, you like, hey, I'm going to get incentives is the word I'm looking for. Thank you. You have more incentives that you can mix in that will it'll make it easier to circumvent the cap, right? And you always say like in the NHL or not the NFL rather, like the cap isn't real, and it is, but it's a lot easier to circumvent. I mean, in the NBA, this is a different league. Comparatively, roster size wise, it's smaller, right? But I mean, right now you've got the Indiana Pacers and the Oklahoma City Thunder playing for the finals, right? And you had the Knicks, so that's a big market. And you had Milwaukee, right? A smaller market. So it was an interesting. I mean, that was an interesting conference final in the NBA. So I guess you could try to adopt their model if it's at all different, but I don't know what the solution is from a tax perspective in the NHL because I don't know that they have. I don't want to say they don't have the resources, but like I find it very difficult to circumvent that problem. The other thing, I guess, and I would be interested. That's more of a question than it is a statement. Like if there's a good solution, I'm interested in hearing it, and I just haven't seen one yet. So that's a question. My second point, I guess, I don't want to say disagree, but yeah, I guess you're not wrong that there is less concern or less attention paid in some of those of the southern markets to hockey players. So you're absolutely right. I mean, yes, Sam Reinhart could win 5 straight cups, go to the beach, hang out, and he might not be noticed by many people. I think that's absolutely correct. But I think this goes back to that Marner conversation, for me at least, in thinking for some players, that's a good thing. But I think for some players, that's also a bad thing. I mean, I think, yeah, there's a disadvantage when you go small market and up north and high taxes. Like there's a lot of boxes being checked off against the Buffalo Sabres situationally. But I think there are some players that do want to have attention paid to them. I think that there are some guys that when they go out, they want people to know who they are. And I think they want hockey to matter because I think there are some players in the NHL who are good at playing hockey and that's their job and that's how they go and make money and they want to win and they want to compete and they want to do X, Y, Z. And there are some players that play because I'm not saying that not everyone loves the game, but I think the love of the game and the want for the sport of hockey to be appreciated is an element that plays into what some NHL players use as decision makers on where they go. So I think to a certain extent, I don't know that every NHL player is thinking, hey, if I go to Florida, I can just off the hook when I leave the rink. I think some guys don't want that.
Yeah. I think too,
but it is playing a bigger and bigger role because it's also an incredible place to live. And that's not to like punish them, but these are realities of the situation. And yeah, if you want to play in a big place, you can go to New York, you can go to Boston, you can go to Chicago, Detroit, any of these major markets. The fact of it is we are seeing a shift in the way things are going in the NHL. And players and people themselves are starting to change. Not as many people embrace I want to be under constant scrutiny at all times mentality. And what you're starting to see is a lot of people are like, you know what? I would love to go to Vegas. They got a great culture. It's a fun city. And I get to keep a little bit more of my money. Some people are like, I'd love to go to Florida. I would love to go to Dallas. And what we're seeing is it used to be you wanted to play in all the big markets. That is now being looked not as positively as it used to be. And I get it. Every market's going to have its pros and cons. But a lot of this is to acknowledge what pros do people have in Buffalo right now. Like we can talk about wanting to attract players in Buffalo. And yes, maybe there's no excuse to not go after Marner. But like you look at in Buffalo, if you're the GM, what is your selling point? Even when the Sabres have had their best eras of hockey, they couldn't attract players via free agency here. So you're talking about a franchise that is, and this is all well known. And I don't want to like harp on the Sabres and be negative, but be all forgiving of Kevin Adams. We're talking small market here, cold market, losing culture, very little history as far as cups. Yes, they were a winning team and a playoff team forever. Taxed higher, division bottom feeder, and then really the only thing you have in your favor is that you're somewhat close to Toronto, where a lot of players are from. But when you put all that together, it's just there should be no imbalances at all in professional leagues. Everything should be level for everybody. And that is the problem I have with the NHL playoff format and the taxes. It's that both of those are things that they create unevenness. And when you have the ability to address it, how do you just let it sit there? And you're right. I don't know what the answer to the tax thing is. But and to answer kind of the 15 years ago, why wasn't it a problem then? Because those organizations were run poorly and they couldn't take advantage of their situations at that point in time. You still have to have smart people running your team, and you still have to have good players on the ice. But when you see an example of players taking a $3 million discount over 4 or 5 years to stay, like Sam Reinhart should be getting paid $12+ million a year right now. And he's in Florida for next to nothing. Like, and maybe he wanted to stay in Florida. And maybe he did Florida a favor. But you don't hear about players turning down $3+ million. We're now getting to a spot where that if it is $2 million, even if it's $3 million, say it's one player, say it's two players, say you save $2 million on one player, $3 million on another. That's $5 million more that you have to get another good line mate.
Well, that's
adds up. And now we're starting to recognize how they're benefiting from it. And they've been able to be aggressive with making trades and fit in a lot of these guys. And at the same time, there's other organizations in the North that are having to spend $2-3 million to get a same caliber player. In a hard cap, that is not fair. It's just not fair that just because of a province's or a state's tax situation, that a team is going to be penalized like that. And some people say, well, blame the province. Well, Buffalo Sabres aren't going to convince the New York State government to change their tax code. And the Toronto Maple Leafs and none of these Canadian teams, who have it even worse than the Sabres, are going to be able to convince Canada to do anything against that. But know what you can do? You can change it to where, factoring in taxes every year, you give the Canadian teams a little bit more room on the cap. Or you could say with Florida, you have lesser taxes, you have a little bit less room. Now, I don't know how exactly that would work. I don't know how you balance it. But to do nothing about it, to not even try to do anything about it, it's typical NHL. Like the Stanley Cup that the Sabres lost against the Dallas Stars. We all know it was an illegal goal. We all know it was wrong, but the league did nothing about it. This is the stuff that bothers me about the NHL. When things are wrong in other leagues, they address it. When things are wrong in the NHL, they just shove it under the carpet and they pretend like it's not even a real thing.
Yeah. And to close, perfect timing. And to close out, that point on NHL and taxes is, we're talking different leagues, and like, I guess the closest comparison to NHL is NBA. You see the two teams in the finals now. They were able to build with youth of selling off older players, building through the draft and young guys. The NHL is not a star-driven league where you just have, 1-2 guys and that's it. It is much more about depth, the players you can build around your star guys. That's where those $2, $3, $4 million extra dollars go into things. That's why this is such an important thing is, you see the NBA, you can build around a Tyrese Halliburton, you bring in some guys around him, but your depth and your 10 through 15 aren't as important as, or 10 through 13, whatever, are important as the rest of it. NHL, each guy is important. You talk each offseason, people are up in arms about what fourth liner is going to come in and play 6 minutes a night for $900,000 a year. Like that is, the nature of the game where that extra money does come into